You're listening to Being Built. I'm Aaron Davis, your host. I'm here with Sheri and Ryan. You guys want to tell everybody a little bit about yourselves? How do you guys know each other?
Sure. Well, I'll start.
Yes, the story about us. So tell us how you guys know each other.
Yeah. So I'm Sheri Chaney Jones. I am the founder and CEO of SureImpact, which is a B2B SaaS platform. And I know Ryan because he and his firm were my development partners from the beginning. Yeah.
Nice. How'd you guys meet?
We met through Rev1 Ventures, I think. No?
No.
Did we meet? Remind me.
I was at a networking event, and one of your sales reps was there.
Okay.
And I met her.
Okay.
I was kind of on the, I don't know. I hadn't even decided I was going to do SureImpact yet, but
so this was early on, huh?
Yeah.
but I was talking to developers to try to decide if I wanted to do it.
So now are you going to blame me for talking you into doing it?
No.
Okay.
No.
Well, that's good.
It'd make it for a good story, but
So
it's not true.
That's a great segue. Tell us about what you're building.
Yeah, so, well, it's more than what I'm building. It's what we built and continue to build. But
Nice.
We're a B2B online SaaS platform. We work with government, nonprofit, social enterprises, and our platform helps them track, measure, and communicate their unique impact.
Okay. So I'm a little bit familiar with outcomes-based medicine in
Yes.
the healthcare industry. Is there a correlation? Is there a relation to that? Or?
There is a correlation. We are definitely not in EHR, although we have many clients who integrate their some of their EHR data into our platform.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's very similar to that, where if you're looking at outcomes in healthcare, we're looking at outcomes in social sector, so
Okay.
economic stability, housing stability, workforce development.
Okay. And what's your platform do? What does SureImpact do?
Who
uses it? Like maybe that's a good place to start.
Yeah, so we really focus in on the what we call social determinants of health space. So organizations who are addressing the things that help one be healthy, but not necessarily the healthcare sector.
Yeah.
So it's nonprofits that are doing affordable housing, workforce development, behavioral health, non-traditional education like after-school programming.
Okay.
Those types of organizations and their funders. So we have our system, our platform actually allows seamless data share between funders and their grantees.
Okay.
Which is pretty groundbreaking in terms of what's available in the market.
Nice. Okay.
I actually believe that we are the only platform in the market that does data sharing the way SureImpact does it.
Yeah, that's interesting. I was just talking to JD Whitlock. He's the CIO at Children's Hospital here in Dayton about social determinants of health and things that they're doing to aggregate and share data with their EHR in particular. Yeah. So, there's a lot of eyes on exactly that in healthcare industry in general.
Yeah.
And SureImpact's user then is, I guess you have multiple stakeholders.
We do.
So how do you, so what I'm curious about, Sheri, is like, what did you set out to build? Because now it's built, right? Like this is being built, right? Like you built something. So what did you set out to build, and how has it changed?
Well, I'm
coming at you next for that.
And he's going to validate. I think you're going to validate this, but I set out to build SureImpact. So previously, I never thought in a million years I would be a tech startup CEO. That's not an entrepreneur. Yes. So my first company is a consulting firm, and we work with the same sector and help them measure and communicate their impact. So we were doing all of this work very manually. We were taking their data from multiple systems, writing statistical code to analyze it, and then bringing the insights back to the leadership and helping them make better decisions with this insight. And our customers were coming to me and saying, Sheri, we love the insights that you're providing. What technology should we be using? So then I started to interview the other options out there and didn't think they worked the way they should. And so, it's that time when I think I got connected to Ryan. There's really nothing on the market that works the way I think it should. Am I crazy to think that I could build it?
You are. And thank you for being so, right? And that's kind of what it takes sometimes to shake
Yeah.
things up a bit.
Yeah.
So you got in early, Ryan.
Yeah.
How did you view it when you started? And then how'd you guys how'd that whole engagement start?
I mean, I knew pretty early on that she was onto something.
Mm-hmm.
And, as the owner of a technology consulting firm, and then, an investor, an advisor, and,
Mm-hmm.
all the slashes, right, that go into LinkedIn profile headlines.
Right.
The thing that I'm always intrigued by is someone that is really close to the problem, really close to customers, and who has a deep knowledge and understanding of the problem.
Mm.
Because I think there's too much that happens in the startup world that is, hey, it'd be cool to build this. Hey, I've got this idea. Hey, this thing would be interesting. But having spent, many years at Measurement Resources doing the consulting piece, Sheri was really close to the problem, really close to the data, really close to the customers, and I think that credibility sort of rang true that there's an opportunity here because I've lived the opportunity while it was a lot of friction and through the process and a lot of friction working with clients, et cetera. So for me, that's really what
Yeah.
sort of bubbled up is her knowledge of the problem, customers, and then the friction associated to the data and understanding what the impact from it is.
How has it changed since you started? And maybe give us a sense of the timeline. So what's the biggest thing that's different than it was at the very beginning?
Man, how long have we been working together now?
It was 2019 is when we started
Okay.
the MVP.
Yeah. So it's been a minute.
Yeah, 3 years deep. Okay.
Yeah. I would say not much has changed in that Sheri had a really grand vision for the platform from the beginning.
Okay.
So I think if there's anything that's been a challenge, it's been that she's had the grand vision from the beginning, and getting to that grand vision takes time. It always takes longer than you think it's going to. It always costs more than you think it's going to, right? 3 times longer, 3 times more expensive is sort of the general rule of thumb that I use, talking to people. And so I think she's sort of already had it all, planned out and sort of understood where the platform could end up and could be. That's still the path, right? That we're on together, and now they're trying to become, as they should, less dependent upon us and to build out, their own team and their own capabilities to take it forward. So it's an interesting evolution that when you're working with a partner to build something, ultimately it's in both parties' best interest to eventually not need each other,
Right.
right?
But it's heartbreaking too. It's like raising children. I've been in the services space several years, and
Yeah,
and
kind of.
it's hard.
Yeah, I mean, at the point that Sheri and the SureImpact team do become completely independent of us, it'll be a sad day for our team,
Yeah.
but it'll be a good day because that means things have evolved to the point where the SureImpact team can be independent.
Well, you still let them come home for the holidays and stuff, though, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's an interesting story, and you're right. I like your way of thinking about it's always going to be harder and it's always going to take longer than you think. How's so you said 2019 was like MVP,
Yeah.
and now it's really about growing your customer base and winning adoption and that kind of thing, right? How's that going?
Yeah. I mean, I think we're still, like Ryan said, I had a grand vision. I going into this and not being a tech founder, I learned that I did a lot of things that are atypical, but have served the company very well.
Okay.
In the sense that this can get recorded out. I had like a really great thought.
Never said you catch this.
The one thing I was going to say is, so what I did that I didn't realize was atypical is that before I even signed the contract with Ryan's firm, I went to my customer base and said, I want to build this product. This is what I want it to do. I don't want to do it by myself. Are you interested? And like that, on the PowerPoint deck alone, I got 5 organizations that said, yes, we're
Okay.
interested. Here is and I said, so what I need you to do is give me your first year's license fee up front.
Okay.
There is no product. There is not even a contract with the development firm yet. And so they all said, yeah, we want that. And so I called my attorney and I said, okay, I did this. Now what do I do? And he drafted up some, documents to get them to sign that they were part of this beta and they were going to give us this money in exchange for, that the product would do X, Y, or Z. And if I didn't do it, if I didn't deliver it and I had a whole year timeline, they would get their money back.
Interesting.
So talk about putting myself in this boiler pressure type situation because
Yeah. So they had some really clear objectives then. If they were able to say, yes, I will do it if X, Y, and Z,
yeah,
they had some very specific objectives or requirements or whatever that you needed to be able to execute a transaction.
yeah.
That's
And
nice when you've got users kind of saying very clearly, I want it to do X, Y,
yeah,
and Z.
but the interesting thing, which was in our best interest, I think long term for a company, but also made it the early MVP very challenging, was that we didn't just go with one vertical. So we had a public health department, we had a social service agency, nonprofit, we had a youth serving agency, and we had a behavioral health organization. So we had the variety was so great that we had to figure out how do we develop this platform that works for not just like one vertical, that works for all verticals.
Do you feel like you spread yourself too thin in the early days?
I think
Would you do it different now if you had a chance?
that's always hard, right? Because it's a really hard.
I'm sorry about the hypothetical. That's
I
horrible.
I think in hindsight, I would have scoped. I would have been like very, very. I would have been clear about the scope for the development team. But that comes with experience and knowledge. But I wouldn't have changed taking those 5 diverse groups because now that means that we're in market, we can serve all those groups.
Yeah.
And had we just gone with one, we could have only potentially gone down to a path where it would have locked us down to only be able to serve one.
Yeah.
So it would have shrunk our market.
What are the customers screaming for now? Is there some clarity about what now A, B, and C need to be the next set of requirements? Yeah.
There's so many. Like our roadmap is at least 3 years deep.
Well, they're always long, the roadmap.
Yeah.
They're always deep but often messy and hard to prioritize.
Yeah.
Do you feel like there's a clear next move for SureImpact?
What I tell the team is there are 3 features that one is released next week, so that is going to be huge. We've got some advanced analytics coming out, which is I did my first. Ryan doesn't know this, but I did my first sales call using the UAT environment. So the testing environment is the environment I did the sales demo, and I was so happy because I didn't have to say.
That's real UAT. That's UAT of the UAT in a sales call, right?
Yes,
Right.
yes.
Did that buyer accept that tested?
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And it was one of those things where, previously and to this release, I would have to say things, they'd ask a question like, well, can we see this particular analysis? And my answer was yes, but you have to export the data and then manipulate Excel in order to get to that outcome. So there and to not have to say yes, but, and just to say, yes, look, here it is. Fun. That was exciting. And so there's 2 other features like that where once they're finished, then I've told my partner success team, which we call customer success, you get to have at the roadmap. But I need these 3 features done before, they control the roadmap.
Yeah. So I'm curious, as I'm sitting here and we're talking about the building process, that all, I've kind of worked in software for a long time and that all feels really familiar to me. And interestingly, I worked in healthcare a little bit too, but not as a provider really. I'm always in an ancillary function. So I'm grasping at the story of like, who is your customer and how does this change their life? Like, what is the impact? Maybe tell me a story or a narrative about somebody who's using it and how it's changed their operation. How do they what kind of, what's it look like? What's it feel like?
So my favorite story, I have two favorite stories. So my first story is our largest network, because I mentioned we serve the nonprofit and their funders.
Okay.
So our largest network is a family foundation called the Seymour Institute.
Okay.
They partner with 54 United Ways across the country.
Okay.
And through that network, there's over 150 nonprofits.
Wow.
What all of these organizations have in common is that they're trying to increase education stability in children. So if you're someone living in poverty and you have to move schools a lot or move a lot, then that hurts children's educational outcomes.
Sure.
So their mission is to keep families stable so that the children, but they have to have children in their own homes to be served under this funding, so that yes, we want to have stable housing, but it's really more for the children, so the children stay in an educational setting.
Makes sense.
And don't have this disruptive move. And so this whole network, and I go into their environment sometimes to just look at their data because I find it so fascinating. It makes me so happy. So across the country, they're measuring how are their programs achieving housing stability, income stability, and economic stability for the families they serve. So
Okay.
at the funder level, before SureImpact, they were receiving Excel spreadsheets from 150 different nonprofits.
Wow. Okay.
And trying to make sense of those Excel spreadsheets and trying to make sense of what was going on in the network.
Okay.
So that's from the funder level, right? Trying to get all that data and make sense of that data. Now, the way SureImpact works is the funder puts in their requirements, it gets pushed down into the nonprofit environments. And so they're using it to record what they're doing every day and the outcomes of the clients that they're serving. So before that, in order to get to those insights, they were likely tracking that in some sort of Google Sheet or Excel sheet, and they couldn't make sense of their data. So now at the nonprofit level, there is a secure tool that the line staff, the person that's interacting with the families, are using to track what they're doing every day. There is a dashboard that the management team gets to log into and see how well their programs are performing. And they don't have to do any reporting up to the funder because it's seamlessly sharing that data
It's just real time.
every 4 hours.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
And so they're just that funder then can just see plainly how many more of these children stay throughout a school year, whatever it is, whatever your memeasurement is.
Whatever it is, and they can do
providers
equity equity analysis is really important, so they can look and make sure that equal, different races, different genders are having the same outcomes.
Okay.
They've done regional analyses, so they've looked at, because it's all over the country, so they've looked at their data by region of the country and noticed where maybe they're having more problems than others achieving specific financial goals. Like it's really changing the way we think about using data in the social sector to solve complex problems.
Yeah. So how does that, as the fundraiser, right? Are they able to use SureImpact in some way that impacts their ability to raise funds? Like is the donation impacted, or how do they leverage it for that purpose?
Yeah, so we are now starting to we've got two amazing case studies where one of our nonprofit customers said that just by having the SureImpact insights, their revenue last year increased by 50%. And we have another user who said because they're able to talk about the impact that SureImpact collects, they've increased their revenue over the last several years. They were one of our first adopters, but over 120%.
Wow.
Because they, when they're writing a grant, they can show what they've done in the past. They can show the success that they've had, which the other their competitors, if you will. I mean, the sector doesn't like to say they have competitors, but they do.
They don't compete, right?
Yeah.
But they do compete.
Yeah, but
you're competing for donations.
For donations
right?
or grants.
There's only so much money.
At a minimum, you're competing for funding.
Right.
Yeah. They can't tell that story. Or they'll try to tell the story, but they'll just talk about, oh, here's Bill. Bill had this fantastic outcome. Yeah. And where our SureImpact users can say, yeah, here's Bill. He had this fantastic outcome. And let me show you that 77% of all of our clients had the same outcome that Bill had.
Yeah. Wow, what a great tool for the benefit of all the other stakeholders, but the donator, the person who donates.
Yeah.
Because there's a value being yeah, you're just giving money altruistically, but you're also getting something. There's a satisfaction of knowing that whatever business you built or career you had or donate or whatever you inherited, you enjoyed, whatever, that it's going to something that you know is helpful, right? And so being able to
Yep.
see that a little clearer even makes that process more satisfying,
Yeah.
right? That's really cool. And maybe that's where that money should go is to somebody who's able to more clearly demonstrate that we had this impact.
Yeah.
We reduce this much volatility in education in the case of that story.
Well, I think that's been one of the challenges inside of the nonprofit space and philanthropy for
Forever.
maybe forever,
Yeah.
right? Is there hasn't been great clarity into spend to impact.
Yeah.
And so I think connecting those dots and figuring that out has been Sheri's mission for for many years now, and SureImpact is the next sort of analytical piece to help with that process.
Yeah. Yeah. I like the concept of getting the service provider kind of in that portal or whatever, and to be really, you can ask very clearly with the unified system, how have you performed X, or what is the number of Y?
And something that is a huge value that I wanted to drive into the field is that even at the individual provider level, when they log into SureImpact, they have their own, they know how their own contribution has moved the needle for their caseload. So if, let's say they have 30 cases,
Yeah.
they can see their own unique contribution to that change, where their manager gets to see how everybody's collectively has moved the needle. But when we think about what we focus on grows, right? And if we want to manage the outcomes, we probably should let the people we're asking to do the work know exactly how they're driving those changes. Because if not, you manage to something else, right? You manage to activity. Well, do we know if that activity works? Now they have clear insight into, is their activity effective?
Yeah. It's a beautiful thing when the person you need most to change their process is demanding that you give them a new tool. And the new tool fits this new objective for reporting and everything else too, right?
Yeah.
So that's a great thing. I guess the biggest beneficiary, kind of that recipient, that person who has that need that this whole community
Yep.
is serving is maybe the least tied into it, but enjoys the most benefit from it.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, yeah. And something that Ryan mentioned, big vision, and we have one use case that this is finally true for. So hopefully one day SureImpact is so ubiquitous, is that the right word?
Ubiquitous.
Ubiquitous. Let me restart. As Ryan said, I have a big vision for this, and my vision is that someday SureImpact is so commonplace that it's just what nonprofits use.
Yeah.
And the reason we can do that is because you can be plugged into multiple funders. We have one organization up in Cleveland who is receiving grants from 2 different of our collaborative license holders.
Okay.
So they log into SureImpact, they do their work, and they share their data.
2 directions to both of their funders.
Yeah, to 2 of their funders.
Oh, that's rad.
The amount of time we're saving them in, needing to figure out where to collect it and how to collect it is significant.
Yeah, that's really cool. So, what's the process been like, Ryan? How do you guys work together? Sheri's not the only person saying do this, do that. There's a team involved, right? Tell us a little bit about that build process.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges that we have as a services firm, especially to clients that may not be familiar with building software products. I mean, that's what we do as a business. So our team does it every day for clients of different sizes and sorts, right, in industries and problem and products to solve different problems in different ways. But in many cases, our clients, this is the first time they've ever built a product,
Right.
or it's at least a unique product to a unique problem. So there's enough uniqueness to it that even if they've built other software products, this is sort of the new game in town to build the next one or the new one. So I think a big part of our responsibility and process is to help a client understand what it means to have a successful product development process, design and development process. I mean, what are points? What are cards, right? You know, simple things like what's stand up, right? And those kinds of things, which to somebody who's never built a software product before, you know, this would be foreign language and a process to them that would be completely unfamiliar. So for our team, it's just, in addition to the actual designing of the screens, the writing of the code, it's awareness of process,
Training your customer, right?
awareness of terminology, etc. Yeah, and you know, there's friction inside of that because for someone to learn an entirely new discipline of building software products and to be exposed to it for the first time, that can be challenging.
Yeah. So 3 years ago, the vision that's coming to life now existed. How exhausting is it to you, Sheri, to wait 3 years on this? And it's not even done yet, right? Like, and what I'm speaking to isn't Ryan and your team. I'm speaking to the nature of building stuff.
Yeah, well, I mean, to give Ryan and his team credit is, you know, they definitely did an agile approach. So we were getting functionality, we were getting
All the time.
features all the time. You know, the whole other side of the story is related to how do you fund this? So if anything, any delays or the reason we're not where we want to be as fast as maybe I would have hoped has nothing to do with Ryan and his team. It has more to do with the resources required to get it done, type of thing.
They say 9 women can't birth a baby in 1 month, right? Like, so I would argue with that. If you had all the money in the world, you would find where the limitations are, right?
Yeah.
Like, no matter what it is, you couldn't rebuild Facebook right now with all 8 billion of us on the planet working on it in a certain amount of time. There's going to be critical paths, right?
Yes.
So the nature of software is just such that sometimes it takes time, right? You have to build this layer to build that layer and so on.
Yeah, and there's
funding's important,
and building software is so different than building other things, like building a house, right? You look at the blueprints, and then you go to a design studio typically, and you pick out the fixtures and the right and the finishings, and then you sort of know what it's going to be. And you might shift an outlet, you know, a foot this way or a foot that way, but once you sort of sign off, it's going to be what it's going to be.
Yeah.
Software is so dynamic because as you're interfacing with customers and they're giving you feedback and you're learning, oh, we thought this was going to be the best user experience, but it turns out this other thing is going to be a better user experience. The pliability of software is both a blessing and a curse.
Have your users surprised you? Have they ever said like you thought they were gonna love this? Like, have you heard the analogy where it's a picture, which is an analogy where you kind of build this sidewalk. It's all brand new paving. It's all landscaped, and then there's this dirt path cut across the corner.
Right?
Yeah.
Or you have like the square peg thing analogy, and everybody just puts it all on the square peg.
The oval in Ohio State.
Right.
You see that all the time.
Right. So, I mean, at some point, it's commonplace, I think, in building software to imagine that they're going to use it this way, and then they're just avoiding it. They just never adopt it the way you think. Have you built any features that, now in retrospect, you realize weren't used the way you thought they were, or weren't loved the way you thought they might be?
Yeah, the one thing I did realize, and I will stand by this probably to the test of time, but we started with the outcomes, the outcome measures piece. Like, to me, because to me that was the most important thing and what was missing from all the other technology. I thought the other technologies did a fine job helping people count things, like count how many people they served or count how many services they provided. But what they were missing was the ability to easily track and measure the results that your clients were receiving. And that really was, for me, the most important piece. So we started there. SureImpact actually bought my IP for Measurement Resources Company, so we could put all these best practice measures into the platform, which that's something I learned too. So we have all these measures in there already pre-populated to help people figure out what they should be measuring. So that's where we started.
That's a really important point, by the way, because, and I don't even know how strategic it was necessarily, but Sheri starting with probably the hardest part first is a significant difference, because a lot of people, when they're building a software product, will start with the easiest stuff first.
Yeah, just so you can have something productive tomorrow.
So
right?
you can have, so you can get something out, etc. But then you're not really testing it, and you're not really validating much either. So when you're
Right.
taking it to market and you're introducing it to customers,
Right.
they're like, sure, I like it. Doesn't do that much for me. So
Right.
I
Cool,
like
you
it.
have a messaging service, so does everything, right?
Right. So I think when you get into the sort of the debate about, do you do easy or hard first? If you have the ability, I would encourage people to do hard first and tackle that kernel that you can then apply some heat to, and because the easy stuff you can get done if you can solve the hard part. Because if you don't ever solve the hard part, you probably don't really have anything ultimately.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, I think that, and we're realizing that now because this release that I told you I'm so excited about, it actually solves for the counting,
Okay.
of things beyond the harder side. And we just know that our clients were not ready. Many of them are not yet ready to go straight to outcomes. They're
Okay.
still living in this, what we would call outputs world.
Mm-hmm.
And now we can help them on their journey. Where before, if they weren't ready for outcomes, they weren't ready for SureImpact. But now we can
You're
ease.
actually compelling these service providers to be
Yes.
more attentive to their impact.
Yes. So now we can ease them into the sales, because I think I thought this is more about a sales conversation than necessarily like a product conversation, but it was, we'd go to people who weren't ready for outcomes and they were still stuck in their little output world.
Yeah.
And they would not buy SureImpact because it didn't check these basic lower level functions, even though it gave them so much power.
It is a product. It is a product thought, though.
Yeah.
And it's not just a sales thought, because you're actually making that market. You're taking an opportunity by providing them functionality they think they think they need, rather,
Yeah.
and then making it easy for them to kind of segue and evolve into and mature into measuring their impact.
Yeah.
You're impacting the community to be more attentive to, and thus more impactful in their outcomes, right?
Yes. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And it is also now, because we started with the hard first, or in my opinion, it was the innovative stuff first. Because I wasn't interested in being a product company. That wasn't my motivation. I've learned that that's a differentiator too, is that we didn't start out to say, hey, we have some cool piece of technology, where could we sell it? Who might use it? We actually said, no, here is a problem, and we think we understand the solution. We are going to build the solution, which I didn't realize that isn't.
Why would you not do it that way?
Yeah. But I am learning that is not always the
happens
norm.
both ways. Yeah. Sometimes it's a widget looking for a fit, and
Yeah.
the other way around. Yeah. So yeah, you were the business specialist or the industry specialist, right? Looking for a way to create the technology to solve that problem.
Yeah.
Well, you can see the way that she talks about the use cases and some of the customer stories, that she's clearly a subject matter expert around nonprofits measuring outcomes and measuring impact. And so for us to be able to work with somebody who's a subject matter expert on something that frankly we don't know anything about, right? Initially, we know how to build software products. We don't know anything about measuring outcomes for social service organizations and nonprofits. Really interesting for us, to take on the challenge, because we get exposure to something that we never otherwise would have, and we get to do it with a subject matter expert. So, what's not the like from our perspective?
Yeah, and it seems like not only an expertise and a knowledge, but what you described as a great strategic move, you expressed as, if it doesn't do this, why bother, right? Like, it's a passion project, right?
Yeah, it is.
It's a passion project with a high impact and a market that's obviously interested in it.
Yeah. And I do want to say, early on, when you asked a question when we started, how did I meet Ryan? I was talking to different software developers, and I was a really good decision to work with AWH and Ryan and his team, because they are I think a very mature shop, and so the discipline that they brought to the build of the product, I know we will that DNA will be in our company's DNA. Like, we will take their processes, their procedures, and you guys are really great at documenting things and code review, like all of that. I've learned how to develop a successful, well-run, even though we're not yet at a late stage software company, but because they run it that way, I now know what that looks like. So as the CEO, I can now have a vision for what should that team look like, how should it operate when that time comes. And I appreciate that. And I think about if I had chosen to just find, a guy that likes to develop software on the side in his basement, which there's nothing wrong with that. But for me, as a non-tech founder, that would have been a disastrous move, most likely, because I wouldn't know how to supervise that person. I wouldn't know if they were doing it in quality or not quality. So that's why I think it's been part of our success too.
Yeah.
To get this vision to a reality.
That's awesome. How long has AWS been around, or AWH been around?
28 years.
Everybody's talking about AWS these days. Azure,
Right, exactly. Yeah. I mean, there's a little bit of AI conversation happening in the world.
Right. A little bit.
And the cloud and behind the AI.
Right.
And so, but it's interesting, on that AI, AWS stuff, Microsoft has been panned for the last decade about being sort of, an old tech company, not cool, not hip, not interesting. And now with their funding of OpenAI, Microsoft is now back on the radar of being this, with it, tech firm, right? And so it's interesting how, in one sort of, and it's a massive deal, obviously, for both Microsoft and OpenAI, but the fact that Microsoft's brand now has turned 180 degrees.
True.
Right.
They're on the front page again.
Right. Which is interesting. It's going to be fascinating to see where it goes. I mean, it's building software is really hard. And I think that you don't know it. And I think Sheri now has an appreciation for it, because as a user, when you don't know what has to happen behind the scenes to make something work and for you to have a good user experience and for it to be valuable, etc., there's a lot of moving parts that have to come together from lots of different craftspeople that, to make it successful. And I think that there's just and users don't need to be aware necessarily. So I'm not saying that they have to know how the sausage is made. But I don't think until you switch sides of the table and you get to the other side, now needing a software product to work or wanting it to work, to commercialize it or to remove friction inside of an operation, etc. It's really, I think, eye-opening when you get on the other side, and then you can look behind the curtain and see, wow, this stuff doesn't just happen. There's actually there's a lot of moving parts that have to come together in concert to make this work.
Yeah. The idea of taking that on completely, and essentially now I'm going to build a software shop.
Yeah.
Right? I'm not just going to build a product and a business, but I'm going to build a software shop and be able to actually employ a hard to hire, hard to keep body of people, to engage in improving a product and a process that's kind of hard to govern and do well.
Yeah.
So if I can be bold enough to risk oversimplifying something that's probably a years long conversation, Ryan, what would be your maybe single most important piece of advice to Sheri and to other founders as they kind of take on the task of building that dev team who's going to own that product long term?
Yeah, I think this is not an epiphany. This is well known inside of business circles, right? Hire really slowly. Because there are a lot of people, like for us to add a team member at AWH, we go through multiple rounds of conversation. And this is controversial. Some people don't like this. Some people do. We do a code test because we want to know if somebody can talk the talk, can they walk the walk? Because lots of people know the right buzzwords to say, and they can come up with conversationally seem like they're technically capable, and until you give them a code test and a code exam, and then they can't get the program to run.
Right.
So my advice to anybody looking to hire technical talent is hire really slowly, and that's hard to do in this environment.
It is, yeah. When they're in high demand and somebody else is ready to move faster, and you're trying to be thorough and careful and attentive to the details that really do matter.
Right. But it's easier. It's going to be easier to have the right person in the right seat by taking your time than it is going to be to, if you, make, some misfires and have the wrong people. And we've got, have and will have lots of clients in this position that engage with us to build a product. And then we've got to hand the baton to them. Mm-hmm. And the initial reaction by almost everybody is, well, let's hire the first person that we can get. Right. Mm-hmm. Because we want to take this on, we want to become independent, et cetera. And I think that there's a mentality of speed there that is less important than getting the right person in than getting somebody in quickly.
That's right. When I was in the Army, we had a saying, slow is fast. And I heard this saying in the context of disassembling, cleaning, and reassembling a rifle. Because it was a training exercise, I wasn't deployed or anything, but as I was kind of learning that process, we were out in the dirt somewhere. And if you go too fast and you lose a cotter pin that's about an inch long, it's as thick as a hair, right? You lose that thing, well, then you're sifting through dirt. Right. So going fast has you sifting through dirt, cleaning up a mess,
sifting through
while you're taking fire, right?
Really quickly.
If you're slow and steady, 120 seconds, you can have that thing taken apart, cleaned up, put back together, and you're back at it, right? But slow doesn't always feel fast. Sometimes fast feels fast, and it's actually slow. Anyway.
Well, and there's the only thing that matters. As a professional services firm, our product is our team. Mm-hmm. But I think even at a product firm, your real product is your team, because right. Your product is going to be a mirror of your team. That's and right. I think that gets overshadowed too often, that the product becomes like the star. The product is only any good if right. The team building the thing is good. That's right. And capable and committed and cares, et cetera. And so I think even inside of product companies, the team often gets overlooked who've actually, turned the wrench to build the thing.
Yeah, that's great advice for founders in general, particularly those who get venture capital money or they get big donations or whatever, and you're sitting on this pile of money, this big vision, and you're like, go, go, go. So it's really tempting to let's onboard a dozen people. We'll start slinging it together. Right?
Sadly, right now, at least in Columbus, yeah. There have been a handful of fast-growing companies that got significant venture capital funding that have now reduced their workforces substantially. Mm-hmm. And if you don't have a sound strategy and you're just sort of trying to fill the office corridors with people in anticipation of having a sound strategy, mm-hmm. If that sound strategy never really appears or doesn't appear fast enough, you're going to have some really difficult moments and times where you're now going to have to do some painful staff reductions. And unfortunately, we're seeing that in Columbus now. And is it going to be good for others, to hire some of those people potentially that then come out of the organizations that are doing the staff reductions? Maybe. I think in the end, I think it's a bad thing overall, because I think it sets a really bad tone of, we raised a bunch of money, so now we're going to go out and rate, and we're going to go hire a bunch of people, even though we don't really yet have market validation. We don't really have a path for sales and marketing. We don't really have adoption of the product yet, et cetera. So mm-hmm. I think there's been a lot of misfires around, acting too quickly and building big companies on top of what turns out to be not very stable foundations.
That's great advice about the pace of building out a product team, making sure that team is as sound, as committed, and as unified as the product needs to be, right? Well, last thing before we run out of time, Sheri, where is SureImpact going? Where do you want it to be in the next couple of years?
Yeah, I think I shared a little bit where we do believe that we are the future of the nonprofit tech side. There's tons of donor databases, right?
Yeah.
The like CRMs for nonprofits that help people fundraise or identify their donors. But when we look at, we're creating a new class of software. We call it impact management software, and that's an interesting challenge when you're not a commodity. You're a new innovative product, but it's also a very exciting opportunity because we're not displacing people. We're bringing them into the future. We're providing something that they didn't have access to before. And so, I mean, my big vision and is and always has been is that we are providing the technology that nonprofits need for the 21st century.
Yeah. I hope when we're looking back, 5 years from now, and we look back, we're like, how did this happen? We'll remember this conversation and this 100 conversations you'll have this year and all of your speaking engagements about your vision to make all of this nonprofit sector measure themselves based on their impact. And so that the rest of the stakeholders that are engaged in that community we can all measure ourselves based on that. As a donor, I can measure that $20 donation or that $10,000 donation. I can measure whether or not that put shoes on feet or kept kids in class or whatever else. Right?
Yeah.
That's a great vision. I think great work. I'm excited for you. I hope it works out well.
Yeah. Thanks.
It continues to work out well for the years to come.
Yes.
All right, Ben.
Me too. Yeah,
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for being a guest.